So he's got it starting at 6:28.
So it's live now.
Good evening, everyone. This is Reverend John Cager. Welcome to Ward AME Church's Bible study. That is one of my favorite songs, Chris and Kyle, Because of the Blood. And Sister McDuffie, if you're watching, no one sings it like you. We're grateful to have you here. We want to give a shout out to everyone who is watching Bible study tonight on Facebook and YouTube. We want to remind you of two things. Number one, if you have questions, ask them through the comments section of Facebook or YouTube. And also, if you watch on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, that opens up a number of different options for us as a church, and we're able to provide more content in better ways for you. We want to remind everyone that Ward's missionaries continue to partner with the National Action Network and World Central Kitchen. I believe since we've been doing the program, we've served over 16,000 meals. It may be way over 16,000, but they are doing it every day, Monday through Friday, noon to 2, providing an incredible resource. If you know people who want food or who need food, don't want to cook restaurant quality meals, they just need to show up and get them. We do need volunteers, however, to continue helping us with that program. So if you've got a couple of hours to volunteer, please contact Sister Rosalind Jones or our Missionary Society. We want to remind everyone that tomorrow night, we will have another installment of Sister Chat with our own First Lady, Sister Kennette Cager, and some sisters from the church. You can watch it on the same platform that you're watching Bible study or church on. They're going to have a marvelous time. You don't want to miss it. For our young people, our YPD call is at 6 p.m. on Friday. It's at 6 p.m. on Friday. If you don't have the information on how to connect to it, reach out to Sister Stacy Holmes at stacy.holmes. That's STACI.HOLMES staci.holmes@yahoo.com. Again, staci.holmes@yahoo.com, and she'll put you on their distribution list so that you can call in. Our winner for Selfie Sunday. Don't hate, but our winners for Selfie Sunday were Sister Annette Rhodes and her husband Ernest Rhodes, because they color coordinated. They had it hooked up. They were tight. Ernest looked like the Good Humor Man, and his white made sure his tie was coordinated with his wife's outfit, and they looked good. Don't hate, appreciate. We will have Selfie Sunday again on the fourth Sunday of June, and you got time to plan your outfit to make sure that you're coordinated and that you get it posted on time. But you need to give some love to the Rhodes, and we will show everyone. I don't have their prize here, so we'll show it next week on Bible study. So Ernest and Annette, you can't get your prize until we've shown it on Bible. We'll show it on Sunday, then give it to you. As we continue on in our Bible study, we are in the book of Esther, and we are attempting to present great women in the Bible from a womanist point of view, which is a feminism through a black woman lens. We're looking at the biblical record, the historical record, and some informed, divinely inspired speculation. And as we traverse through the book of Esther, we want to make sure we understand who she was in all of those aspects. Last week, Reverend Anderson discussed the rise of Esther. In the first week, we discussed Queen Vashti and her role. Last week, Reverend Anderson discussed Esther's rise from obscurity to becoming the queen of Persia. And this week, we want to take a deeper dive into Esther's role as the queen of Persia. The rabbis claim that Sarah, Rahab, Abigail, one of King David's wives, and Esther were the four most beautiful women, at least in the Old Testament. And it's important to understand that beauty is not necessarily a function of youth. Beauty is not necessarily a function of being pristine. I know Reverend Anderson presented Esther as a young girl, young woman last week. It is, however, the opinion of many scholars and writers that Esther was probably a more mature woman. And understand this, as she was listed as one of the most beautiful women in the Bible, we're now talking about a beautiful, mature woman. And not just a beautiful, mature woman, not necessarily an untouched woman. When you look at the four who were named, Sarah, Rahab, Abigail, and Esther, several of them were on their second husbands when they come into the picture in the Bible, and yet they are still regarded as beautiful. And we cannot allow the Western Victorian era definition of women that they have to be barely out of adolescence and completely inexperienced to be regarded as beautiful. Beauty very often is something that develops as a woman matures. You may have good looks and supple skin when you're young, but beauty, some say, is like wine, and it has to age so that it comes to its full flower and bouquet. And when you look at some of the women in the Bible, Bathsheba, who was clearly a beautiful woman, was not King David's first wife. Ruth was, or David was not Bathsheba's first husband. When you look at the story of Ruth, Boaz was not her first husband. Ruth had been married 10 years before she meets Boaz. So she wasn't some 17-year-old, fresh off the farm. When you look at Esther, we don't know precisely Esther's history prior to her marrying the king, we do know that in some translations, the Bible lists Mordecai as her uncle. There are some schools of thought, many scholars who think that Esther may have well been Mordecai's wife, because there are instances in the Bible where people have hidden their marital status for their own physical security and to advance God's plan. And so when we get to Esther, we may be talking about not a very young girl, but a fully mature woman. And so we want to keep that in mind as we hear her story. And today we're actually going to skip over chapter 3. I'll bring you up to speed. And well, let me bring you up to speed. In chapter 3, Esther becomes the queen, and she has served as queen for 5 years. She has been integral in breaking up a plot to assassinate her husband. She and her uncle Mordecai, or she and Mordecai, whatever their relationship were, got word to the king that his enemies were coming after him. He responded in kind, and she just continued to grow in favor with the king. Whenever you rise up, somebody's going to hate on you. It's just a natural point of life. When you rise up, someone's going to hate on you. As it happens with Mordecai, because of Mordecai's elevation in stifling the plot against the king, Mordecai bumps head against Haman, one of the king's advisors, and he refuses to let Haman disrespect him. Haman then concocts a plan to get the king's permission to execute all of the Jews. Remember, the king does not know that Esther is Jewish. He just knows she's this beautiful young woman who he's married. Haman concocts this plan. He bribes the king. The king is probably oblivious to who is who in his kingdom. All he knows is that Haman's going to give him 10,000 silver talents and some other things. And what does he care about? Some Jews. And so the king okays the plan, and word gets back to Mordecai and to the Jews what Haman has planned. And so Mordecai now reaches out to Esther, who's in the palace. And here is in Esther 4 at verse 9, what we hear happens after Mordecai attempts to tell Esther about the plot against the Jews. Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message from Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. I myself have not been called to come in to the king for 30 days. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you'll come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. So as we said, Esther's been queen for 5 years. There's political intrigue going on the outside, but because Esther is the queen, she is sheltered from what's going on outside. She's got a palace. She has servants. She has the finest things in life. And when things are going well for you and you are sheltered, It's easy to become oblivious to what's going on around you. Put it this way, one of the world's great sayings is money is a great deodorant. You just don't smell what's happening when all the smells of the bad stuff have to come through your mountain of money. Esther is privileged. And more importantly, they don't know that Esther's not Persian like everyone else in the palace. Now, brings us to a question I want some of you to answer. And the question is, what are you willing to give up for your people, for your family, and for your God? What are you willing to give up for your people? That's number one. What are you willing to give up for your family? What are you willing to give up for your God? Many of you, like me, have family members who have an interesting racial mix. My great-grandmother, my maternal great-grandmother, had two sets of families. She had a family with the slave master, and then after slavery, she had a family with my grandfather. And they were all in the same area, but some of my relatives who were able, after the war or during the antebellum after Civil War period, even though they had a black grandmama, they didn't choose to live black because of their coloration and their hair grade and some other things. They were able to pass. And many of you have family members who have passed or who are passing right now. They ultimately were able to survive and thrive in a different culture because people did not know who they were. And some of them got so comfortable that once they crossed over, they never had any contact with the other side, the darker side of the family. And it's not just black Americans. That's happened pretty much everywhere there has been colonization by white people. Happened in Asia, happened in Central and South America, happens all over. There are people who are able to pass as one thing and turn their backs or forget their connections to their other relatives. Esther, at this point, has to make a choice. She is in the king's palace. She is living the life of a queen. She has everything she wants, and then word is sent to her from Mordecai saying, your people are about to be wiped out, and we need you to stand up for your people. I would imagine that as Esther looked at her jewels and looked at her silks and looked at her lifestyle, she could have easily said, these are my people right here in the palace. I'm Persian. I'm the king's wife. Y'all deal with your situation, but I have moved on up. I have climbed the ladder and watched me pull it up behind me. And it's a difficult choice. I've made it. I'm comfortable. I'm good. Do I stay comfortable or do I take a risk for my people, for my family, and ultimately for my God? I don't know if any of you have been in that situation personally, but we could all think of examples of people who have made sacrifices for people, family, God, and we know people who have run away. As I was looking at the situation with the young man who was killed in Minnesota, the cop kneeling on his neck, I think about what Colin Kaepernick gave up to take a knee on behalf of brothers, unarmed brothers being killed unnecessarily by police. He gave up a career, gave up endorsements, gave up relationships for his people, for his family, for his God. Do we have any questions or any answers to questions? Let's hear the questions.
Was Esther a go-between between her people and the king? Do you want the second question too?
Yeah.
Second question is, was it not the Hathach duty to tell the king that Esther was a Jew since Mordecai threw her under the bus in his message?
Okay, let me deal with the first question first, or the second question first. Hathach was a eunuch in the harem. That means that Hathach reported to Esther. pretty much all of the servants, if they didn't know, would have guessed that Esther was Jewish because Mordecai was always coming around. If you look in the 3rd chapter, beginning of the 4th, Mordecai would sometimes patrol outside the harem and converse with Esther just to make sure everything was okay. Esther, even as the queen, she was not protected from the politics of being in the palace, and so Mordecai was keeping an eye out, and so it was probably true that Hathach guessed, and some of the other servants guessed, that she was Jewish. However, many of us understand, if you've been in organizations, you have to make a choice. Am I loyal to the organization and the big boss, or am I loyal to the person who supervises me? And most of us are loyal to the person who hired us, brought us in, who we report to, particularly if they're good to us. We don't have precise details as to whether or not Esther was good to the service, but we can assume because they apparently were able to keep the secret that she was Jewish. As to the question of was Esther a go-between between her people and the king, not at this point. What Esther is in the 4th chapter of Esther is a queen who is living the life. And in some cases, you might draw the inference from the information that we get from Mordecai's request. She may be someone who has been so far removed from the people that she no longer identifies with the people. Indeed, when you look at Esther's response to Mordecai, that starts in verse 9, Esther hears that Haman has convinced the king to let him execute all of the Jews, and Esther is like, I can't go into the king. If I go into the king and he hasn't called me, he could put me to death. You're asking me to risk my life, risk my lifestyle, risk my possessions, risk my jewels, risk my having servants and silks. I'm not about that. That's Esther's initial response. Any other questions? Well, as we continue on, and these are words that are critical for us to hear. Mordecai hears Esther's response, no, I'm not about to go into the king and he hasn't called me because you want me to risk my life and get killed. And Mordecai in verse 13 says these words, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows, perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. For those of you who read human behavior and understand human nature, I suspect that Mordecai was having an ebonical moment with Esther. I mean, look, little girl, you might think that these Persians think that you're Persian and will continue to treat you like you're a Persian. But understand this, they're going to know who you are. And when all the other Jews get it, you're going to get it too. You might have forgotten that you're a Jew because you got all this stuff and all these possessions. You're living high up here in the palace. You might think you just like them, but you're not. And they will show themselves to you. Some of us in our lives have been in that situation where because we got access to things and we moved into situations and we were let into this club or that job or through that door, we thought that our race or our ethnicity was not important to the folks we were now hanging out with. And some of us got a rude awakening. I think even now, I pray as often as I can for Meghan Markle, because even though the Duke, the Prince, has said, no, this is my wife and she's in my royal family, and the queen has signed papers and made her this or that. You still have people, we don't want that little ink spot on our lily white piece of paper in the royal family. I can think back to certain celebrities who I'm just going to be blunt. Many of us can remember 26 years ago, 27 years ago, there was one African American who Time magazine said had transcended race, O.J. Simpson. But when the stuff hit the wall, O.J. found out who was with him. And for many of us, when we get to a situation and we forget where we came from, sometimes it's a brother, a sister, a relative, a wise counselor who reminds us, no, you're going to still need your people. Don't forget where you came from. And it's a difficult situation. I love my lifestyle. I love my mansion. I love my possessions. I love the fact that my kids aren't going to the little neighborhood school, but they're being taken to the private school up on Mulholland. We can fall in love with all of that stuff and forget who we are and where we came from. Any other questions? For those of you who are watching, in the beginning of chapter 4, when Esther hears Mordecai's request, the Bible says that she writhed because she understood, if y'all get me caught up in that mess, if y'all get me pulled into that stuff, that's going to mess up my good thing. Ultimately, Esther chooses to do the right thing. It was not an easy decision. It tells us in verse 16. Okay, you go and gather all the Jews. I need y'all to fast and pray for 3 days. I need y'all to call Big Mama and them, tell them to get down on their knees. But if everyone prays, and I'm going to pray too, after 3 days, I'm going to go to the king, and whatever happens, happens. I'm in God's hands. For many of us, it becomes very difficult to make that choice, doing the right thing for everyone versus doing the right thing for me. In Esther's case, Mordecai tells her, look, the right thing for everyone is the right thing for you too. But for some of us, we can do the right thing for us and other folks will perish and we will get away scot-free, at least physically. But there is some question as to whether we will get away with it mentally, we'll get away with it spiritually, we'll get away with it morally, we'll get away with it in our soul. How would you feel if you made a choice that was good for you and wiped out your entire family? How would you feel if you made a choice that was good for you and it wiped out your entire people? How would you feel if you made a choice that was good for you, but it made God angry? I don't know how Esther felt about it for her people or for her family, but even though God is not mentioned in the book, I suspect she was not prepared to stand before God and say that she made that choice. We have a question.
Yes. How do you not forget without getting caught up?
That's the issue. Sometimes, well, the question was, how do you not forget without getting caught up? Yeah. Understand this. The choice Esther made was to get caught up. And sometimes you have to get caught up in it. And that's the very choice that you make. A lot of people want to go through life, well, I don't want to get political and I don't want to be in the mess. I just want to go ahead and do my thing. But sometimes you're in a position where doing your thing is the wrong thing. Sometimes you have to stand up. Sometimes you have to speak up. I was gratified because, and I don't want to belabor the point, but a lot of times when things happen to black people, a lot of our professional entertainers and athletes are silent, not because they don't care, but because they don't want to mess up. They don't want to mess up their endorsements. They don't want to mess up their relations with their teams, etc., etc. But there was a football player who came out 2 days ago and said he was tired of what happened after he watched the man die in Minnesota. And he said he was not going to be silent anymore, regardless of what happened to him or his career. So sometimes you have to make the choice to get caught up. Any other questions? And so with Esther, after she talks with Mordecai, she makes the determination, yeah, this might hurt. This might cost me everything. But I'm going to spend some time getting myself together mentally and spiritually, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to go and I'm going to do the right thing. And if I die, I die. Some of you have sat in church and you made the testimony, for God I live and for God I'm going to die. And then when you get to an Esther moment, you lived for you and you died for you. But Esther stands as an example for all of us that she was going to do the right thing. I want to take a moment to lift up African American womanhood. You are the most discriminated against, talked about, mistreated demographic in the world. And yet when we look at the history of African Americans, where we have made our strides and improvements have been because African American women have stood up and have spoken up. You were the backbone that made us survive slavery, the backbone that held us up through Jim Crowism. You were the backbone that supported both numerically and financially the civil rights movement, and even Barack Obama, who many of you adopted as your surrogate son or surrogate brother or whatever. I maintain that while the Republicans had all the billionaires, Barack Obama got elected off of the money of little old black women on SSI and Social Security and retirement funds, because you have demonstrated over and over again your ability and resolution to stand up for people, for family, and for God. So in my mind, I always see Esther as a beautiful black woman. We want to remind everyone to watch Sister Talk tomorrow, 7 p.m. on this same platform for which you're watching Bible study. We also want to remind everyone, or remind our young people, about the YPD call on Friday. If you aren't connected, contact Sister Stacy Holmes at staci.holmes@yahoo.com. And then on Sunday, we will have the prize that we'll show you for our selfie winner. And we're going to have 2 special announcements regarding our graduation day. And hopefully everyone has gotten their information. And if not, go check out our Facebook pages and our website to make sure that you sign up for graduation Sunday. And we'll have information about our celebration of Father's Day. Let's go to God in prayer. God, we thank you and we praise you for what our eyes have seen, for what our ears have heard, and for what our hearts have felt. Right now, God, as we close the Bible study, we continue to abide in your presence. Keep us safe, God, from hurt, harm, or danger. Keep us striving to do your will in your way. And we will be ever so careful to give you the praise. Amen. Remember, Ward is on the way.